Hello and good afternoon. Thank you all so very much for joining us. I'm incredibly excited to dive into our topic today. Today we're going to be covering something that's really critical. First and foremost, it's where the driver's journey begins and how us as fleets can really help to optimize driver retention for the long haul. And that's really around driver integration. So we're going to be talking about best practices both for recruiting and for orientation and onboarding, as well as how to keep that driver for the long haul. So with me, I have a fantastic guest, a terrific professional within the trucking industry, good personal friend, Jeff McKinney, who's the VP of Safety at Jetco, which is a GTI company. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. So before we get rolling, I'd love to turn the time over to you to give a little background and introduction on yourself.
All right. Well, thanks, Hayden. It's great to be with you and everybody else that's attending. My name is Jeff McKinney. I'm the Vice President of Safety for Jetco and the GTI group of companies. Been with Jetco for the last 15 years. A little background on me, U.S. Marine Corps, police officer, and somehow I went into driving a truck for about 17 years. And from there, at Warner Enterprises, stepped into the safety industry and kind of never looked back, and ended up out here in Texas with Jetco. So it's been a ride for quite a while.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, you are a consummate professional and one has been around this industry for quite some time. So we're all excited to dive into this conversation with you. So my name is Hayden Cardiff. I'm the founder and chief innovation officer here at Idelic. And at Idelic, our job is to help you and your team bring your drivers home safe each and every night, along with being able to help you reduce crashes, improve retention, and ultimately improve insurance outcomes across the board. So obviously driver integration and onboarding, which leads into better driver retention, is a huge, is near and dear to our hearts as well. So Jeff and I are both excited to dive into the topic. So a little bit of housekeeping. From an agenda perspective, like I mentioned, we are going to talk about this journey of recruiting to onboarding and beyond. And so we're going to start with recruiting best practices. What are some of the different key areas of how to establish that good first step? Jumping into the handoff from recruiting to onboarding, and then talking about the differences between orientation and onboarding, because there are some key pieces there. And obviously talking about how we can start to really engage that driver beyond the onboarding and integration period. And as always, we want to really be able to leave you with next steps, things that you can take away from this webinar and from the conversation today and be able to implement into practice starting today. And so we want this to be as engaging and interactive as possible. So you've got the chat box, you've got the Q&A section. Please, along the way, start to throw those questions out, add comments. We will start to engage with you along the way. We want to make sure that this is a discussion. So please ask questions, add your comments. We'll talk about those and address those as we move along. But at the end, we will also have some dedicated time for some questions and answers as well. So with that being said, let's jump in. So one of the things that we've noticed, Jeff, and you're a big proponent of this as well, is driver performance management is one of the key concepts and areas that really helps with this engagement. When we talk about driver performance management, it's really that intersection between driver productivity and driver safety, right? And that intersection, that midpoint there, is driver retention and engagement. And so driver performance management as it relates to us as fleets is how can we as fleets be able to enact the different processes and procedures that allows us to optimize that satisfaction, optimize that safety, and really help those drivers perform at their best. And so a part of that driver performance management equation is driver recruiting. And so this is where we want to start. So, Jeff, when you look at driver recruiting, standardization is the key, right? There's obviously going to always be exceptions. Each driver is unique, but from a process perspective, being able to standardize how you're bringing drivers in, what you're saying to them, the expectations you're setting for them are all really critical, because that expectation part is what we found to be one of the biggest drivers of turnover. So with that setting expectations, what are some of the common examples that you've seen where driver recruiters may be painting rainbows or overselling the experience the driver is going to get at your fleet?
I'll pay you, Hayden. I'm going to pay you $10,000 bonus to join me right now and come work for Jetco. All right. That sounds great. Wow, I need the money. We just came out of the pandemic. We have drivers, we need drivers, and that $10,000 sounds nice. But when I get there, the recruiter didn't tell me that that's going to be spread over around about a 2 to 3 year period. And so me, I'm not talking bad about the recruiters. They just tell you half the story. But you get some of these guys that, unfortunately, some of these drivers work paycheck to paycheck. And when they see that big money, I expect to get that $10,000 when I sign on, not spread over 2 to 3 years. I see one not too far from here saying guaranteed salary. Is that true? Yeah. Or is it something that I have to work toward and eventually I get that guaranteed salary? So that's kind of the way that I've seen it, the way it, it was done to me when I was driving. When you talk to these drivers, you got to be real. Yeah. There's a lot. These professional drivers are smart.
Yeah. Well, and so obviously you're coming from experience, which is fantastic on both sides of the equation. But I think you hit on a really good point, which is the things that they say might not ultimately be wrong, but the way that they're implemented might not be what the drivers are expecting. Right. And I think that gap of, again, the truth of what's actually happening and the expectations of what the driver have, right? That gap is where frustration comes in and, tempers flare and drivers ultimately leave. And so I think that's a really good point as far as like talking about, the best way to sell a driver is to be real. It's to be honest. It's to talk about the fine print, right? And that level of honesty, like you can kind of parlay that into a deeper relationship. Like, look, hey, most people around are going to tell you you're going to get a $10,000 bonus. What we'll tell you is, we're going to give you 10,000, but it's spread over the 2 years because we want to make sure that you're getting, that there's a strong commitment and a teamwork here, right? We're going to tell you that up front, we're going to be honest with you. That's what you're going to get from us, honesty, right? Like even like breaking that out for them gives them a sense of realism, a sense of truth that what you say can be trusted.
You want to be transparent. With drivers that I've seen, they're very very educated and they want to know why they do things. And okay, I'll tell you why we're doing that, and I want to keep you, but I also want to make sure that you're fit for the company. I just don't want to bring anybody to the company. Yeah,
no, that's spot on. So Jeff, I'm going to ask you this next question. I want to get your take, but I also want to ask ask all the audience as well to jump in the chat box and start throwing in, different comments there. So, what are some of the expectations you, as a safety leader, as someone who's going to have to manage this driver after, like, what are some of the expectations you want to ensure that your drivers are getting right at the beginning inside of that recruiting piece, right? And same goes for all the listeners and attendees on the webinar. I'd love to hear inside the chat, like, what are some of those expectations, both operationally and culturally? What are some of those expectations you're trying to set with that driver from day one?
Well, for me and for Jetco, the first thing I'm looking for and trying to instill into them and see what they are is culture. It's all about behavior. Everything we do in safety is driver behavior. Safety, I just want to, okay, are you one of those ones that can follow our culture, can follow the directions, and then listen to them? Something we don't do very well. None of us do. We hardly listen. And that's probably one of the biggest things is I'm going to shut up and I'm going to listen to that professional, and I'm going to do my best not to say driver. I'm going to say professional because that's what they are, and we got to treat them as such. But you have to listen. we can listen, but what are you hearing? Are you hearing what they're saying? And don't talk back at them, talk to them. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of listening and talking to them and make sure that they have the culture. And majority of the drivers, you wouldn't believe they do have a culture. It's just, are they educated on the culture?
I love that. I want to ask a question to keep that we got. I want to ask a follow up to that, but we got some really good comments coming in. Keep those coming as far as what are some of the expectations culturally and operationally that you're trying to set. But Jeff, you mentioned something like you want to understand their culture. What are some of the signs that you hear that help you understand that they either would be a good fit for the Jetco culture or that they might not be a good fit?
I had one not too long ago, and I cannot remember the basis of it, but they were one that said that this company they were working at tried to do something that they didn't think was safe, so they said no. And that was a kicker for me. Way to go, because I hear too much, too many times where we're looking at an applicant and that professional, he's doing some silly things, and they say, well, the company said I'll lose my job if I didn't do this and do this. Well, they got to take a stand. And I hear there are a few of them out there that will take the stand and says, I'm not going to do that because it is unsafe. And, we look at it, we discuss it, we quantify that, and more power to you. Yeah. If the drivers will do that and stand up for themselves and stand up for safety, because the way things, all this data and everything that's coming in from drive cams and, and all these telematics we have in these trucks now, it tells a story. You have to be transparent now because we're going to know the truth. All of us are going to know the truth now.
Yeah, that's it. I love that. Like, Monique, Jason asked a question, just like any tips on hearing or asking what candidate safety culture is. And I think you just hit on a good one, which is like, ask for scenarios, right? Like, hey, what have you ever told someone no, when you felt like they were doing something unsafe? Like if that's one of the things that's really important to you, like a driver who's willing to stand up and say, no, I don't think that's safe, man, ask them about it. Ask them if they have any experiences with it. Like that one gives you a good sense of like, what are those certain scenarios that they seem or think are unsafe, but also they know that you want them to say no, right? Like that's a part of your culture. I think that's good. Yeah, Monique just brought up open-ended questions, not yes or no's are good. Anything else to add to that, Jeff?
Sorry, Hayden. Jason, here's another one. And we all, hopefully we all run the PSP and look at the PSP, and you're going to be able to tell, okay, you start seeing a lot of tire issues, brake issues. You start asking that question, and I guarantee it's going to come back. Well, I told the company, I wrote it up on my DVIR, and you're going to know. But look at the PSP. The PSP is not the all in, but it's where you can get these questions answered and start seeing the culture.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so we had some really good comments come in about what are some of the other things that operationally and culturally that they look for when kind of setting expectations. Monique brought up, let them know about the bonus breakdown, kind of what you were talking about, Jeff, around kind of the, the signing bonus, things like bonus breakdown before they agree to the position. That's huge. Brad talks about defining the hours and the pay scale, which is critical, right? Especially if you have an operation that has multiple different positions, like helping them understand, like, this is what you're signing up for. This is what we expect around hours and pay. Talking about orientation, breaking down, their understanding of what's going to happen to them right after they sign. Orientation is 3 parts. One due before activation, one due within 30 days, one, 90 days of hazmat. And also talking about safety courses that are going to start in 30 days. So like really giving them that lay of the land. Listening to nonverbal cues as well. What is their culture and motives? Great points. And Monique, continues, like, ask them to tell you what are unsafe situations that they've encountered and how do they respond to it, right? So a lot of really good points. Amanda, how do you help bridge the gap between recruiting and ops, that hands off? So that's Amanda, that's a question that we're going to talk about here in a second. So we'll hold on to that one. But yeah, target pay, hours that they're willing to work. And yeah, this is a good one. So Jeff, we're going to go off script for a second, because this is one that I've heard a lot about. As I talk to fleets, driver pay has obviously gone up, right? Just the nature of the economy and kind of the landscape of trucking, like everyone started to pay drivers more. But one of the to be honest, quite interesting and scary trends that I've seen is, instead of earning more, drivers are working less to earn the same. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Not, some drivers try that here, but I know where you're going at.
Yeah.
But yes, some drivers are trying to get the more money and work less. I don't think it's happening here at the GTI group.
Okay.
But I have seen that where, we're having to raise prices. I mean, look at the fuel, look at everything else. We have to. And, some drivers, they're okay with what they make. And so, okay, I'll work a little bit less and make the same. And that's, your productivity probably is going to fall a little bit. That's probably where you have a discussion with the drivers and say, hey, we're all in this together. We're having a hard time because we're not Jetco, GTI. None of us on this list I've seen of all these people. We don't have enough drivers, and it's hard. And this shortage has been here forever and a day. It's just been magnified lately. But I think it's the time where you have to communicate and talk to your drivers. And if you don't talk to your drivers at your companies, whether you're small or large, I think you need to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And again, like that's so, and that's great that hasn't been your experience, Jeff, but Jason, Monique both jumped in right away and said, right, yes, like that is one of the things that we're seeing. To me, that's a pretty concerning trend that I think that we're seeing in the industry as a whole, right? Like we're all looking for capacity. We're all looking for more driver hours, but when you pay a driver more and they just pull back on the hours they work to keep the same standard of living, like that's a little worrisome. So I think, to Monique's point, like asking what is their target pay, how many hours are they willing to work, like set that expectation up front inside of that recruiting process, and you're going to be able to have better conversations with that driver down the line. If they start to pull back, you say, hey, like your expectation was this, like we want to meet that expectation for you, we're giving you more miles, more hours, like let's go, right?
You just have that conversation. You just tell them you control how much you get paid, and it is.
Yeah. I
mean, here you go. This is what you're going to be making, at the minimum, but it's up to you if you want to make this right here. Yeah. And I've always told drivers, it's up to you how much. I'm not going to tell you how much you're going to make because I'm not you, and I'm not going to run this route like you do. But they control how they're getting paid. And how much they make. So that's where that conversation comes from, you saying, okay, you're going to control your pay. Here's our mileage, here's the hourly, whatever it is. Yeah. But you control that, not Jetco, not Warner or whoever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I mean, those are all important conversations. I mean, Chris brings up like the younger drivers entering the workforce seem to be more concerned with home time, getting harder to find drivers to run nights and or weekends, right? Like before, we could pay extra hours and people were excited and willing to raise their hand and jump in and do that. But I think that kind of perpetuates, like there's some creativity that needs to happen. And one of the like Valerie brings up like the fact that like she's at a nonprofit right now. So finding drivers for a nonprofit is really challenging, hard to beat, for-profit companies. I hear that. I empathize with that a lot. My dad has been in nonprofit for over 30 years. And so I get and understand that world, and it's hard to compete on pay, and you have to compete on other factors like standard of living, like working for a company that they can get behind and and feel a part of and feel appreciative towards. And so that really kind of ties into some of the conversation we're gonna have in a second, just around like that onboarding and orientation and piece. Before I get there, I do want to jump into an important aspect of what I think I don't think we give enough airtime as far as like really understanding where we stand, and that is around requirements for hiring, right? Jeff, everyone has their minimum standard of requirement for what constitutes the ability to be hired at your fleet, right? X number, no more than X number of moving violations or crashes or whatever the case is, drug, no drug, no positive drug tests in the last 2 years. Like everyone has their kind of minimum standards, but because it's very challenging to hire drivers, I've heard, some swells in certain areas of, do we lower our standards of who we hire? Jeff, what are your thoughts about, even in this environment, is it a viable path to lower the standards of hiring?
Well, I think it depends on what you're lowering. I just lowered mine, but it's up to, sometimes it's up to the insurance.
Yeah.
All right. You cannot go below the insurance. The insurance won't back you. But we're with a captive. We're very, very careful. The only thing I did was just lower. We had a 2 years experience. I lowered it down to a year and a half. Okay, yep. I'm comfortable with that right there. But I'd be careful about lowering anything else. We kind of increased. We lowered that, increased some other things, and it's kind of the scale that you have to weigh. Okay, what is this compared to this? But I'd be very, very careful. I would talk to an attorney.
Yep.
That's exactly what I do. When I lower it, I said, okay, is this going to hurt me in some type of litigation if they're involved in an accident? Unfortunately, we have to do that because of these nuclear verdicts that are going out, and everybody thinks they want to own a trucking company. But be very, very careful. You can. And I feel comfortable lowering some standards, but not all.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's like looking at different pools of drivers from an experience level could be a viable option, right? And in doing that, like you have to understand that the path after you hire them needs to change, and we'll get to that in a second. But there are certain things that I would recommend, and I'm sure it sounds like you would also recommend, that you don't change. Right? Your like safety standards, right? Not allowing for more violations or citations, not allowing for more, motor vehicle accidents, things like that. Like keeping your standards from a safety perspective where they're at, right? And then looking at some of those other criteria to balance off of and try to find different pools of still qualified drivers. Does that sound right?
Perfect. Yeah. Again, you have your safety stand. Safety, culture. I'm just going to go. Safety is in our DNA at Jetco. Okay, yeah. It's a core value. Values never change. My priorities do, and they go up and down. My priorities coming here in the morning. I had this set of priorities, but they were turned upside down. But the value is going to stay constant. So you think about that. Safety. It's got to be that core value, and it needs to stay steady. Yeah. And as long as you stay right there at that line or above that line, you'll be just fine. But don't lower the safety standards.
Yeah. And because when you do, you're sending a message to the rest of your drivers who have historically been very safe, right? Yeah. Like you're bringing in B and C players when the rest of the team feels like we're all A players, right? And that's infectious. Monique brings up a good point, like lowering standards equals more risk and higher incident rates, right? Like, which more risk, higher incident rates, you're going to have to ultimately, you will likely have to get rid of those drivers anyways. Just now have to pay a much higher price. So one of the things that I think is really important on this recruiting side is, in talking to fleets, there's a lot of examples of where a driver might meet the minimum requirement, but yet fleets still have reservations around that driver. It's like, they're on the cusp. Maybe there's a few things that are on their record that might bring you pause, but they still meet the minimum standards. Like, Jeff, if you have a stronger and tailored onboarding and coaching process, how does that give you more confidence in bringing on some of those drivers who are on the fringe? They meet the minimum standard, but they're on the fringe where you might not normally hire those drivers.
Well, again, I look at each driver, and I'll bring Amanda in. Amanda and I both look at almost every driver to come in here. And there are some are right there, just like you said, Hayden. But when we talk to them, we bring them in for an interview, and this might play into what Amanda was saying. We want them to talk to operations. This is not a safety deal. This is a team deal. Okay. So when you're bringing drivers on, compliance and safety look and make sure they meet the minimum requirements, but let's get operations involved. Do they mesh together? Will they work together? But from the conversations we have, we look at them, we look at the background, we talk to them. Okay, why were you hired here or whatnot? I think that we can coach or put some extra training, a development, a personal development plan together. Maybe it's a little bit longer training or something of that nature for this particular professional. So I will look at them, and it's just a case-by-case basis that we'll move on, and maybe we just add a little bit of additional training, or we might find out during orientation, okay, maybe it wasn't a good fit, but we gave it a try. I'm willing to try and give people second chances, but they'll filter out during the orientation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I think that's where I would like, and that's a really good transition actually to this kind of this handoff period, because one of the best practices of driver performance management that we really recommend is having different onboarding tracks, right? So Jeff, you talked about like, there's a difference between hiring a driver, which now is, 18 months of driving experience versus 15 years of driving experience, right? And that driver wants to feel unique and special, and you want to be able to tailor different things to them. And so being able to have different onboarding tracks allows you to get the confidence in the specific needs that driver has, right? So maybe there's some issues that they've had, but you want to give a driver a second chance. So I coach them up specifically on those different pieces versus someone else who I might give them my more traditional down the line, here's my onboarding. It's more engagement focused as opposed to coaching focused. I
see where you're going. The way we do it, and I don't, and again, this is just the way we do it. We've gone to kind of like a virtual type orientation. We still have it in person, but we're going to be able to see everybody goes to the same thing. Again, here's the value, and we're not going to go below that value. So the 15-year and the 18-month, the 3-year or 18-month guy, they're going to go through the same thing. But when they come in for the orientation in person, we still have the in person. That's where things will change a little bit. The training will change a little bit, and that's where you kind of divide and conquer. Okay, I'm meeting with this guy. He did very well. He did the virtual training very, very well and very fast. So that means that he's into it and he wants to learn, and you're gonna learn something. But if you have somebody that can't finish it and does 2 or 3 modules, and then comes to orientation, why are you wasting my time? Why are you wasting your time? So I'm gonna be pretty blunt about it. But I think things won't change until they get to the orientation and split up into the training. For go the training and then the onboarding.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like there's that minimum baseline that everyone has to get, whether it's the understanding of the culture, whether it's the baseline training and kind of orientation process. But then to your point, like when you start to get into the onboarding side of things, right, that's where you can have kind of your baseline driver engagement, driver touch points. But then for some people, you can start to layer on additional coaching, layer on additional engagement for addressing specific needs. And so that brings up a really important piece that I want to make sure that we cover. And that is orientation and onboarding are two very different and distinct things. Mm-hmm. This is one of the things, like as I talk to fleets, sometimes get conflated. Orientation equals onboarding and vice versa, right? So when I talk to fleets, orientation is generally between, some, a lot of people have, 2-day orientation, some even up to 5 days to a week, right? But that's that first couple of days you bring drivers in, whether it's virtually or in person, kind of walk through that process. Jeff, talk me through kind of what's your orientation process look like?
But prior to orientation in person, they go through a virtual orientation, around about 41 different type of topics, from culture to the basics of backing, dropping and hooking, things of that nature. Everybody hopefully does the same thing. ELDs. When they come into the orientation in person, that's where we're starting to interact a little bit more with the professional, and paperwork and things of that. To me, that's orientation. Paperwork and all that stuff, all that's orientation. Toward the end, that's when you start talking about the onboarding and going out with the driver and starting to be on your own and seeing the trucks and working with operations, and you bring them and take them around and look at and talk to the different people that they're going to interact with every single day, or at least once or twice a week. So, yes, if all in all, trying to expedite it, but not cutting corners, you have probably about 4.5 hours of virtual training, and then an 8-hour in person, and then the onboarding starts from there.
Got it. Good question came in from Gary. Jeff, do you compensate them for that pre-orientation? And yes. If so, how?
Yes. So we, poor Amanda, had to go through that orientation quite a few times to split it up. But we figured out it was right about 4.5 hours. And Amanda, if you will put a note on there to make sure I'm right, we're just paying them kind of like a day pay. I'm not going to sit there and skimp on anybody. It's just pay them a day pay for that virtual. If they do not finish it, they're going to stay an extra day before they're out before the onboarding to complete that, because they might have questions, and some people, have a hard time doing things online anyway. And it depends. If it's an old dog like me, can't stand the computer and all, we smoking and bandit type people like me, it's a little bit harder. Some of the younger drivers and professionals, it's very, very easy. So yeah, we compensate for that one thing, and we watch that every day.
Yeah. And if they don't finish, you said that you extend them. How long do you extend them? How many days?
It's only a couple hours the next day. It's not long.
Yeah. And kind of along the same, like for those pre-orientation side of things, they're watching videos, they're understanding, how does that process work? Is it through a system? How do they watch that videos, and how do you keep track and know that they've completed that?
It goes through an LPS, a learning platform. So we have a platform, a vendor that we go through. So I'm watching somebody ask me, Gary, somebody was asking how we see that. We can see a report. We can have a report either emailed to us, or we just get into the system and we can see how long they were in each topic and how they did. It gives them a score. Plus they also get, points, and we can watch them through that way of getting this taken care of. So it's not a bad thing. It can read to you. It can. It does a lot of things. It's a great platform. It can do it in any language, which is nice now, especially for Jetco, since we're up in Canada. So we need it for some of the Canadian French. So it's a great platform, one that you can watch. You can see how long they've been in there, where they're at in their progress. And it's really probably the next wave. Most of these companies, I know the large companies are going right now, and we're starting to move that way also. So it's virtual training.
Jeff, we got some questions around that. What vendor do you use?
All right, Luma.
There we go. Yeah, Luma, and they're a great partner of ours as well. So we've seen a lot of good success from our customer base who use them. Good questions. And then obviously they're an LMS platform. Who else do you use for the other training side of things, Jeff?
Well, I mean, Luma is my 100% for all my training. I mean, what I like about it is we can put our own spin to it. We can make a video, put it in there in 5 minutes, and have some type of training. We put drivers in there, whatever we want to do. So we'll try to do that we have a training process, so it goes out every other week, and they have 2 weeks to do a training, and then probably once a quarter we'll have the in-person trainings. We're trying to get back into that because you still have to have that, and excuse me everybody, but you still have to have that touch. Yeah. So I still want to get in front of people and talk, and y'all can tell me I love to talk, but so do the drivers. And what a better way to listen to the drivers than be in front of them. But also the Luma, we can do kind of like a Luma Live, the same thing we're doing right now with Zoom, as they have that, so you can talk to them. What scares me, and I haven't done it yet, but we can do Luma Live on there and do some virtual training live, but that scares me to death. Yeah.
So Jason also mentioned that they use Infinity, which is another LMS platform. Another good partner of ours. So those are the two that we see the most. Those are the two that we've seen the most success with, as well as kind of Luma and Infinity. Yep. So before I jump away from this, right, that handoff piece, right, like, obviously there's a lot of documentation that is captured inside of the recruiting process, a lot of that expectation setting, that all of that should be transferred over to orientation and then onboarding, right? And because like when you talk about onboarding, Jeff, like we like to break that onboarding journey out into segments, right? So from the moment that orientation is completed to the first 3 months, and then from 3 to 6 months, and then 6 months and beyond, right? Like there's certain touch points and engagements that need to happen, whether it's your dispatcher, driver manager, fleet manager, whatever you title that person, like their consistent messaging, right? Whether it's, we've even had customers be able to jump in and have, be able to have their payroll people call in on, day 15 and say, hey, you should have gotten your first paycheck in, numbers look good, everything looked great, thanks for coming and working for GTI. All like those types of touch points and engagements. Like what are some of the different people you like to get involved? Who are some of the different people you like to get involved throughout that kind of overarching onboarding piece? And what are some of the main kind of touch points that you like to have?
The first touch point, and it's, from orientation over to the onboarding, is the driver trainers, the mentors. Yep. All right. So they're going to be with somebody, depending if it's owner operator company, how long they're with that mentor. But once that training is over with, after the orientation, and that's part of the onboarding, is you're a little bit closer now to somebody that's been inside for a while. So those guys are, we put everybody on a PDP, personal development program. Wonder where that came from. I think it came from Idelic. And part of the task is they have to contact the new professional and talk to them. Says, how's it going now that you're not with me? And they feel comfortable. Yep. And then it's going to be the driver manager in the coming weeks after that. And then it's going to be the safety. Right now, we don't have the payroll. I mean, we're so small. We have an open door, which I love and I hate sometimes, but we have an open door where anybody can come in here. So the larger we get, probably that has to slow down a little bit. But you know, driver manager, the mentor trainers, safety. Everybody's scared of safety all the time and don't.
I,
I mean, look at me. I like to joke. I'm already joking on this webinar, but you got to be down. We all got to talk on the same level. Don't raise yourself to be above that professional because we're all on the same team. And so all those touches, it lasts for about 30 days or so here. And then moving forward, they have that mentor that they can go back to all the time. You know, we give everybody emails here. So they get a Jetco driver's email and they can email anybody, and we do our best to reply as fast as we can. They have a payroll email they can send things to when they have problems. So it's more of that communication during that onboarding that's very, very important.
yeah, I love that. And you mentioned the professional development plan, those onboarding plans, right? So when you can kind of template out and automate that engagement process, it makes it much less daunting, and you get a much more high quality engagement within your fleet. And so there's a couple questions like, how long is that onboarding process? Like, I think for me, and Jeff, you can chime in as well, but for me, like, knowing that the vast majority of turnover happens in the first 90 days, like, we have to understand that drivers aren't fully integrated into our fleet for 90 to 180 days, like 3 to 6 months, at least, until the driver feels like they're fully integrated into your fleet.
Yeah, I mean, this one's, again, I'm going behavior. How long can someone, have to check in and do this and do that? I mean, I talk about that, or we talk about that during safety meetings. How much of attention span do some of these guys have? Now, you're right. The first 180 days or so is crucial. You still have that touch point, but my plan only lasts for about 30 or so days, depending on that driver. It could be a little bit longer, but I'm not going to sit here and drag things out. They got to get comfortable with their surroundings and figure it out. That's probably not the best way to say that, figure it out, but they have to be on their own and learn to fly, if you will. Okay. Yeah. And they're not going to do that if somebody's constantly holding the hand. Now, we're going to hold your hand and we're going to be your partner. Everybody here is a team, it's a partner, but you have to let them fly a little bit. Can they fly? Can they get out of the nest and get comfortable? So that's why mine's around about 30 days. I understand this 6 months and things like that, but yeah, again, knowing the drivers, to me, I don't like it. I'd rather set them free, give them a little bit, set them free, and then you can sit there and watch them and then communicate from there.
Absolutely. And so the thing that we've seen, and Jeff, you kind of hit it on the head with even just kind of how you explain that, like there's variation between how much engagement that you're pushing out to that driver at each of those different stages, right? First 30 days, you've got to be super tight into that driver, right? Day one, you mentioned, safety manager or dispatcher, driver trainers calling them and say, hey, thanks so much for coming to GTI in Jetco. We're so happy to have you. Like, you're resetting those expectations. Like, hey, we understood that from recruiting, you were told that you were going to get 2,000 miles a week, this much home time, like just kind of walk through all those different pieces. And then you're just like, does that make sense? Does that check out? Yep, great. All right, we're on the same page. And if you're not on the same page, reset expectations on day one, right? To make sure that everything's aligned. And then even getting to a point where you can start to engage with the driver on a personal level, right? Like start talking about, even if there's like sports affiliations, pets, family, whatever the case is, to where on day 8, now that same driver the same driver manager or dispatcher has a touch point or a task to engage with that driver, pull up notes from before and you see like, hey, looks like we met your expectations for mileage and home time this week. Fantastic. Keep up the great work. We're going to make sure, we're here to support you with that. Even like you found out the driver's wife's name is Jessica, like, hey, how's Jessica enjoying your transition to Jetco? Like those types of details matter.
And let me throw in a story. You just kicked off something.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, you want to do something, find out something about that new applicant, that new team member. I'm going to give kudos to Amanda here, if she's still on here. She found out that one of our, and she's left, one of our new applicants had a birthday, and she had a birthday cupcakes waiting for him when he got into orientation day one. And, you know, doing the little things like that and setting the culture and making them feel like part of a team. And here, this one's kind of childish or something, but team together, everyone achieves more.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't treat them like a family and part of the team, why should I even stay?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I love that. So like having multiple people kind of get involved and have some of these touch points is, you know, early on, I think is absolutely critical. And obviously you need to have to pull back at some point. But I think it's important to understand at an executive and managerial level that your drivers are still finding their footing for the first several months. And so, you know, with that mentality and know like, the danger that I've seen is when fleets, you know, get done with orientation, slap a driver on the butt and say, all right, go make some money. And that's like, they assume that the driver is ready to go, locked in, and the only time they should talk to him is if they see issues or challenges. And that's not a good way to engage with the driver, even if it's, you know, every, you know, once a month, every month after, you know, after the first month, it's just a simple driver manager check-in, like, hey man, you're doing great. I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling. Anything we can do better, right? Just like a non-dispatch call, and just to make the driver feel like you care about them. Like, hey man, coming up on your 3-month, 3-month anniversary. Congrats! Like we're excited to have you. Like those little things can be all it takes to help round out this onboarding process over an extended period of time.
The things that we forget here, and I'll leave this and then we can move on. The one thing that we all forget, those drivers have more time by themselves, not talking to a soul, listening to the radio, dealing with the traffic, the roadside inspections and whatnot. They have so much time to think and things can get crossed, but they want to hear from somebody. And
Yeah.
just to say, hi, how are you doing? How's your day? It does go a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me jump back. There's a couple questions and comments along the way before we move on. I want to catch these. So Chris asked, you know, how do you compensate your driver trainers?
Well, you know, we pay them a trainer pay. You know, that we're a little bit different. We're more of a local, regional type carrier, so we don't pay the traditional way, but we pay a little bit extra to the trainers. And again, the trainers, the culture we have, are willing to step up and be the mentors and make sure it's right, because they own it.
Yeah.
They own it. So yeah, we do pay a little bit. I can remember at a large company, Warner, the trainers they got paid the mileage the trainee drove. So it was pretty good for them. They were compensated very, very well.
Yeah.
But I can't, you know, we just pay a little bit. I can't say what we do, but we have a trainer pay.
Got it. And how does that mentorship work between trainer and driver? Like,
well, you know, it's more or less they just become a friend, talk to each other. You know, you know we have it where just for 5 days these guys are riding together. The trainer, the mentor is going to be just walking you through, holding your hand.
yeah.
This is what I do. See it, say it, do it. The way I train. And so they're going to watch it. They're going to be asked questions, or they can ask the trainer questions, and it's going to flip on them the next week for 5 more days where they sit there and now they're doing it and you got the trainer. So, you know, that relationship, they're going to become a little closer. And then now they have somebody they can call on to when they have problems on down the road. They're going to see them quite a bit because, again, local, regional, they're seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week or out there on the road at the ports and whatnot. So
yeah,
that's kind of the mentor trainee relationship right there.
got it. No, that makes a ton of sense. And Gary, Gary brings up a good point. Like the buy-in has to come from the trainers to train the same across the board, right?
Yep.
And I think this is one where, and also taking their time, being safe, like that's something that like people feel that as like a calling. Like I have done really well with safety, and I feel like I can spread that knowledge to others. And so there's people who just naturally want to jump into those types of positions. One of the things that we've seen as being very successful is those professional development plans, right? Being able to have a templated program that says on day 1, I talk to this driver about these things with talking points and coaching tracks all listed out. Day 5, day 15, day 27, like here within the next 3 weeks, these are the things that I'm going to be talking to the driver about from a coaching perspective and onboarding perspective. I know, Jeff, you mentioned that those have been super helpful for you. You want to elaborate on kind of just like the consistency level of having that type of structure?
I'm military, routine, okay? And the PDP, you have all these different tasks, and it's just, just having this routine. And it's not to get complacent, and I don't want to get that confused with complacency, but you have these different tasks, and you just, if you just want to stay, you're trying to stay within the culture. You want to do the same thing. Everybody be on the level playing field. But now let's take this to on down the road when something happens and you're being asked by a judge or a jury or an attorney, did you do this with this person to this person? 2 different drivers. Yes, we're the same over and over and over. So having that personal development program, which whatever way you want to do it, whether it's with a platform like I have with Idyllic or your own, is just make sure you have those different tasks and you stay with it and you follow it to the law, or follow it to the letter, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
But it does make it so much easier. So you don't stray away and you don't interpret it the wrong way, and everybody goes on their own interpretation. This is it. This is the way you do it. And if it needs to be changed, and it is living and breathing with the different type drivers, maybe we change it, but we change it for all, not just this one person or that person.
No, that's well said. I appreciate that. And that's good insight. So Anne asked, like, what does a PDP consist of? So professional development plan, generally, and Jeff, you can kind of highlight this as far as, 1 to 2 different people across 3 to 4 weeks, a couple touch points a week.
Yeah, it's my safety manager, a driver manager, is the trainer or the mentor, but it also in there, squeezed in there, you'll throw some different type trainings. And the PDP is not just for the new drivers, it's for drivers who've had crashes or drivers, again, the system Idyllic, it brings all my telematics into one place. So now I can see the trends and I can work the trends and different behaviors that are coming, and you use that PDP to change behaviors. So it's not just for the hiring and the first 180 days, 6 months, 1 year, whatever it is. It's there for anybody in in your company to help them change a behavior and develop a better opportunity doing the right thing and doing it the right way. Or you can call it a PIP, personal. My wife says PIP all the time. It drives me insane. I like PDP, but it's all the same. It's just more or less a little micro training process, or training, whatever you call it, manual, something of that nature.
Yeah.
I don't know how you want to say it that way, but it's just a development program.
That's perfect. And what we found from a real world and also within the research, but like from a real world standpoint, is when you coach a driver, whether it's for onboarding or, like Jeff said, whether it's kind of proactive coaching to change behavior, one-off individual trainings, especially when looking at nothing but telematic events, camera events, like, to be candid, it doesn't really work. Like drivers immediately feel defensive, right? and they put up a wall and they don't change, when you say, all right, here's a moving violation, or here's a harsh braking alert that's coachable, let me call the driver, coach them, and then check a box and move on. So when you come in and say, all right, we see a pattern, as Jeff said, when we see a pattern of behavior that needs to change, let's work through defensive driving, or let's work through speed management. And so over the next 3 or 4 weeks, myself, your safety manager, your dispatcher, we're all going to be engaging with you to help change these behaviors, because we want you to be safe. You're not in trouble. We want you to be effective and come home safe to your family every night. Like, when you do that and have, a couple touch points each week across those 3 or 4 weeks, it changes behavior for the driver. And funny enough, like, you look at the data, if you have a 30-day plan, the risky behavior oftentimes stays the same, maybe even gets worse over the first 2 weeks of that plan, meaning that it takes time for drivers to really understand what's going on and be able to change behavior. And then right about that 2-week mark, there's a sharp decline in telematic events and risky behavior, and then a steady decline for the next 6 months after that plan is completed. So when you have these types of plans, you see drivers actually change behaviors, and you see really strong results.
And behaviors don't change overnight. Think about when you're kids, your parents said, don't do that and don't do this. And we kept on doing it. And then the older we got, we started understanding. So it's just human behavior. And sometimes you have to say something to them quite a few times. But, with the drivers, again, when I said earlier in the program, talk to the drivers. Don't talk at them, and listen, and guarantee that things will change.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And that kind of leads us to the final piece that I want to talk about. I know we've got just a couple minutes left here. Man, time flies, Jeff, when you're having fun, buddy.
Yes, I'm loving it. Let's go another hour, everybody.
Let's roll. No, but so you bring up a good point. Like, after onboarding, right after the driver's integrated into your fleet, now what? Right? Do you leave them alone and then only talk to them when something negative happens? Like, what's the engagement cadence that you should have after a driver kind of goes through that onboarding process?
We don't slow down. You just we push a lot. Hey, let's do this, let's do that. I see career development. I'm probably jumping ahead, but we're pretty diverse at Jetco. We have intermodal, open deck, van, heavy haul, some specialties up in Canada. And if some of those drivers want to move around, and when one thing slows down, another one's going to pick up. So you're pretty diverse. And if you want to learn, let's say you're an open deck flatbed driver and you want to learn containers, and ladies and gentlemen, containers, vans, and all, they're all different. Don't think that just because I drive a van or a flatbed, I can go do this. It's totally different. So we have a training program for the containers, for some of these refrigerated containers. So those have been a pain lately. So you keep pushing them. Hey, why don't you do this? And see where they want to go, to see if they want to develop their professional careers into something totally different. So if they do move on, and I hope they don't, but to better, if they want to better themselves and go somewhere else and make more money, at least I help them become a safer driver, because I don't want to let a driver go at Jetco and not help him, and then just put somebody on the road, and then they're just endangering the traveling public again. So do everything, push training, push them to be better. And again, I bet you majority, 95% of your team would want to learn something totally different and learn and just continued education.
I love that career path, right? Being it, like you said it well, like being able to sit a driver down and say, where do you see yourself in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like, How can we help you get there? Let's put you on a path. Let's check in consistently, and let's work towards those goals. Let's, like, when you lay that out for a driver, now there's something above and beyond just the the weekly paycheck that they're looking forward to, and that they see themselves growing within your organization, which obviously helps with retention, but also just general job satisfaction as well. So that's a big part. So, but like, I think the biggest message that you just, if you distilled that down, Jeff, to me, the biggest message that came across is you have to have a consistent cadence with that driver in perpetuity, right? And you should know, like, it's dispatchers, driver managers, fleet managers, whoever you want to engage with that driver, have consistent touch points. Use a system that has those reminders, like throughout, PDP plans or those tasks to help remind you. But again, make sure that you have those consistent, touch points. Monique mentions, monthly scorecards for positive reinforcement, right? Being able to highlight and recognize those drivers on an ongoing basis is also much advised, very, very important.
Yeah, here's one for Monique. We have a vendor for drive cameras that show outside and inside the cab. I give out bonuses every week for a drive cam bonus every week, every month, every quarter,
Yep.
and then every year. And for those who, and it's a little time consuming, but I think I can run a report and see, okay, who's had a coaching event. Unfortunately, you're out, but if you haven't had any coaching events, then I'm giving away money every week, every month, every quarter, and then every year. So it is reinforcing. They're doing a great job, because that's, when we're in trouble, everybody remembers the bad things, but they never see the good things. So that's what we're trying to do, is enforce the good things that everybody does.
I love it. And real quick, Monique asked, what does that bonus look like?
So it's $200 for 2 drivers for the weekly, $500 for the monthly, 1 driver, and then I think it goes up to like 1,000 and 2,000, something of that nature. I'm not really clear. I don't have it all in front of me, but
no, that ballpark is fantastic. I think the
something that it might not be a lot, but it is saying, hey, look, I didn't have any dry cams. I can do it. Why can't you do it?
Yep.
A little bit of peer pressure.
That's it. Well, Jeff, I want you to formulate a hot take, 30 seconds. What are steps that you can take today? And while you kind of put that together real quick, I will answer. Steph asked, where can they see this recording of the webinar? We will be sending out the recording to everyone who signed up, so don't worry. Probably a day or two, you'll see that in your inbox. Thank you all for signing up and for all the fantastic participation. Jeff, signing off. What are some steps that fleets can take today to better onboard and engage their drivers?
First of all, talk to the drivers and listen to them. First step. Second step, get your operations involved. This is not a safety and compliance deal. This is a team deal. So get your operations involved. Okay. Third, communicate again, and continue to communicate and continue to communicate. That's all. I mean, guys, it's the easiest thing. I have over 300 drivers spread out between Texas and Canada, and I try to talk to as many people as I can, and I try to get the team to talk to as many people. Just talk, and communicate, make them feel a part of the team. And that's, but talk and communicate and listen, get the operations involved. Those are the 2 biggest things that I can think of right now.
Fantastic. Jeff, operationalizing safety and operationalizing that whole safety outlook, I think, is one of the most important things that we often preach. So thank you for reiterating that. Well, we are at time. Thank you for hanging on a couple minutes over for us. This has been just a terrific session. Jeff, I can't thank you enough for all the fantastic insights and tips that you shared. If you want to get a hold of me or Jeff, please feel free to reach out. you can reach me at hayden@idelic.com. That's IDELIC.com. We'll be sending out contact information as well. Jeff, what's the best place if people have additional questions?
You can send mine to JT McKinney, McKinney at Jetco, JETCO delivery.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much. We are excited. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. Again, in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to Jeff or myself